Hot Water History, episode 168, Thursday night. Richard, what's going on?
Not much, Charlie. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Been a weird week to be in America
Mm.
with the art of the deal going on.
Yeah. And it is interesting to see the various sides that are taken here with Rand Paul coming out very passionately arguing for a separation of powers and that Congress is truly vested with the power to raise, lower, establish, or disestablish tariffs. And already the division exists within the Republican side or on the Republican side as to what type of power the president can wield in an uninhibited way as he's doing now, supposedly to attain free trade, which we would be vocal and passionate advocates for. But what's troubling is as nations and well, different countries and different governments have approached him, including Vietnam and India, to call for zero tariffs, zero reciprocal tariffs. He has intimated that, as say Trump has intimated, that he might just keep them on just for a little while longer, even if those nations go to zero tariffs, respective of United States or American goods entering their shores and ports.
It's interesting that when we wrote the book, we talked a lot, obviously, about tariffs and we talked a lot about inflation. I didn't
Yes.
expect it to be this culturally relevant in the 4 years afterwards.
Yes,
It's pretty cool to see.
right. And not only do tariffs reemerge like the blob that will never die, no matter how many spikes and arrows and slings you impale it with, or the concept with, but the greater notion, and I have been edified to see on a variety of different social media networks, including X, which I'm on for a lot during a given day, or certainly within a week or so, is the conversation about the un-American nature of what essentially is mercantilism. This is what we're really forced to admit here is that mercantilism is being pursued, and as you and I would argue, persuasively contend in a twisted history of the United States, the American war for independence from Great Britain was inspired largely by, despite the cries that we've been told, or despite the canards we've been forced to imbibe in our public schooling or even private schooling, that it's no taxation without representation, and it was a question of political will and sovereignty. It really began under the context of an espousal by the Americans of what would generally be known as just economics at the time. That is to say, the whole study of economics was allied against the notions of centralized control, especially as it reared its ugly head in the form of trade, exchange, commerce, in the form of mercantilism. And the Americans were not on the side of the mercantilists. The British Parliament was advocating for centralized mercantilism, as opposed to the Americans who, whether they were John Hancock, who happened to be the biggest rabble rouser in Boston, he and Samuel Adams, they were traders. Americans did not wish to be forced into a perpetual state of economic and political adolescence by their British overseers.
And it's cool that even though some people are still misunderstood on both of the terms, like inflation, oh, that's just prices going up, right?
Mm. It's not a monetary
Or
phenomenon.
yeah, right. It is interesting to see.
Milton Friedman never existed. You know that.
It
Yeah.
is interesting to see more people at least know the term or understand the term as it's obviously taken a huge part of a lot of people's lives just
Yes.
3 years, not even 3 years after us publishing that.
Mm. Yes. And it does require people who are even in the least passively engaged with the politics of the day or what's going on in the economic sphere to, if not the first time, to become knowledgeable of them, of these terms and ideas and notions, then to reacquaint themselves with these phenomena. That's a good development, I suppose. It's a good question. I suppose that remains is, and it's really the job of, I would say, outlets like our own here and on the website, and when we're in our proximate communities and when we're engaged with other people to make the case that the mercantilists ought not win because it is milk toast, albeit milk toast and socialism light, it's still socialism.
Right.
And that free markets are often the answer. It really requires us to articulate both in a passionate and convincing way and an attainable way, an understandable in an understandable approach. How to rouse people's, we've spoken about this a lot, that really what we're lacking in modern times is imagination. And what the propaganda of the state does so well is it just suffocates imagination to the point where who will build the roads isn't just a silly rhetorical question, it's a serious one. Where it ought not be, because you could just simply pique someone's imagination as Murray Rothbard did and say, well, who made your shoes? Who sewed your tie? Who built the house in which you abide?
Right. Yeah, we are that imagination's got to be at, I don't know, historically speaking,
Yes,
we have to be at a bottom.
I think so. And what the cause and foundation of that absence of imagination is, I wonder. And you see it even in the different artistic realms that were thought to be the most creative and imaginative. For example, Hollywood, for all intents and purposes, from my perspective and point of view, is dead essentially. They're not coming up with really new ideas or concepts. Now, I read a scholar a long time ago, and I forgot his name, who said that essentially every story, every narrative in fiction, or even that which is compelling and retold from nonfiction or historical works, is really follows one of two patterns or tropes, long-standing themes. It's either the Iliad or the Odyssey, right? It's man against man or man against nature, that type of thing.
Hmm.
And you could really fit a large corpus or a large section of the corpus of human literature into those two basic categories. Just as within philosophy, you could just, whatever philosophical tradition you're studying, you could say, okay, well, Bacon and the rationalists, or I forget if he was a rationalist or empiricist, and then Descartes as a rationalist. Really, those are just outgrowths of Plato or Aristotle. They're either more Platonic or they're more Aristotelian. And you could even go back to that uh, with economic traditions and theories. Is this something that aligns with a Smithian understanding, or is it, Marxist or something along those lines? Of course, Smith had his own problems, but yeah, I would say those are the two possibilities or buckets in which you might find those works. Uh, I we're just not, at the same time, we're not creating something that extends beyond the bounds of what's already been established as acceptable. It's very Overton window limited, but also lacking in creativity.
I'm just curious if you gave people in the 1880s and 90s the internet and AI,
If they would all of a sudden, their
or
imagination
maybe
was,
you would
or
bring, maybe you have to bring them. They just seem so much more imaginative than we are today.
yes,
But we have more tool, like we should supposedly be creating more if we have more to work with. But
sure,
we're not, it doesn't seem like we are.
yes, yeah, and it goes to the having ready access to what we might broadly term knowledge does not inspire necessarily. Just having access to it does not make one knowledgeable, nor does it certainly make one wise. And beyond that, it does not render one creative. Maybe that instant access to the wide range of human thought or information is what dulls the imagination. It doesn't
Good.
allow you to test it or stretch it. And as because someone will say, well, that's not true because I looked and Grok says this.
Right.
And that really can suffocate if you really wanted to employ your imagination, whether it's in a scientific, or sci-fi, fantasy type of mode, or whether you're just having a oh, okay, so a case in point would be how our how our bar conversations really reduced to essentially fact finding or fact affirming exchanges. So a case in point would be something along the lines of in prior decades, we could sit and have a 25-minute conversation or debate as to who the greatest Pittsburgh Pirate was, right? And then you're gonna, I would argue Roberto Clemente, and you're gonna say, well, already it's Paul Skeens, or already it's think of another great Pittsburgh Pirate. I can't. It's not Willie Stargell, right? And because of his prowess in the playoffs or his performance in the playoffs or something like that. And we would have these exchanges. But then what we have today is because we have the power of supercomputers in our pockets, we take it out and say, no, there's no argument here. Roberto Clemente has this many war, and this statistic is supposed to be the all-encompassing
Right.
measure of the effectiveness or the the power, if you will, of a baseball player to affect the outcome of a game. And what's more important than affecting the outcome of a singular game as you play more and more of them?
Hmm.
And Willie Stargell's is not this, but then, and then it's really kind of interesting too, because in those conversations, someone will bring up, well, we have to talk about intangibles. And then an empiricist will come in and say, intangibles? Well, that's ridiculous because you can't measure those things. And so they're not up for debate and the like. So is that the cause of our decline of collective imagination? Maybe. It could
I
be
think,
also that no one reads books anymore,
yeah.
or the attention span of someone. If you happen to look back even at classical, great pieces of cinema and movies, I mean, how much of how much are you really following? How much is an audience really noticing the symbolism or the nuances and implications that are contained therein, and then can discuss them afterwards? Sort of sad thing, the decline of movie going, you don't have that opportunity to afterwards talk about it at length because all the material coming out is so unoriginal or debased.
Hmm. Trying to remember the last movie I went to go see. I
Hmm.
think it's been a little while. Anyways, what do you want to talk about today?
So we have this wild video that we like to show and play for you of, and many I suspect in the audience have had this experience of going to a fundraiser or usually not a place of worship, but some major gathering, and there'll be an artist there that does this very quick style of painting, and you don't know really what is being painted. And then at the end, she or he puts in a few more strokes, and the grand reveal is, or they sometimes flip the
Flip it over.
painting, flip it over, and then sure enough, oh, that's what it was the whole time. And they are accompanied with music. Well, given the tackiness of it, it's fitting that we'd have this episode from an evangelical megachurch. So if there's no objections to Charlie, I'd like to play that video for you now. That, yeah. Well, it is amazing how evangelicals, just like well, heretics and apostates from the one holy Catholic and the Apostolic Church in past centuries, and ever since the death and resurrection of Christ, have always glommed onto and worshiped state authorities. It's true of the earliest heretics. It was true of Arius. It was true of George the Arian, who forced out Athanasius from the Alexandrian See. They all appealed to Constantius, who was an Arian heretic. They all run into the arms of government, and they wish to use the powers of government to impose their heresy upon the rest of, especially the Orthodox. Um, it's the case of, let's fast forward to the Reformation. What happens to Luther after the Diet of Worms in 1517? He runs into the protection of Frederick of Saxony. So he runs into the sympathetic arms of a German lord. And that German lord, of course, has every incentive to try to break up what he considers the monopoly of the church's power within Germany and form a faction and perhaps go to war and gain lands for his own, and even maybe more serfs for his own advancement. Uh, John Calvin does the same thing. Calvin can't. It's as though Protestantism and Calvinism in particular can't exist outside the state. The state is a necessary component, if not the foundational component of Calvinism. And Calvin and his not merry band of fellow heretics and uh, proto-Puritans take over the city of Geneva and start to wield dictatorial power through the Geneva Consistory. Uh, it's the same thing in modern times with modern evangelicals. They worship the state. They're almost, as you saw there, foaming at the mouth to see Trump as this, not only the catechon or restrainer from revelation, but this Cyrus of Persia type of figure who's to be revered for returning the United States to true Protestant Christian values and mode of living. And none of that is true. It's all, well, maybe this is where we were talking about the lack of imagination. Maybe all of our imagination is focused in the wrong way or is deployed and exercised in the wrong way. And thus we're exhausted when, if we were to do something like C.S. Lewis in Narnia or That Hideous Strength and talk about greater ideas and ideals of human existence, well, we can't do that because we're all so lazy as to place the trajectory of our hope and futures in a man who, especially for evangelicals, they have to gloss over the fact that in the first campaign in 2016, when he was asked what was his favorite Bible verse, he says, "Well, it's from 2 Corinthians." It's like, okay, buddy. Or he might have even mispronounced Corinthians, something along those lines. So it it is amazing, and I'll give Dave Smith credit for this. He always said, and I really argued that this is true. I would posit that this is true, that for Trump fans, Trump is never as good as they make him out to be. And for Trump haters, he's never nearly as bad as the haters make him out to be. So maybe it's just the all-encompassing fear or apprehension of the man not living up to their either low or high expectations that people are willing to simply accede to this vision of him. That's just conjecture on my part.
Why is that? Why do they always run to the state?
Well, because it's demonic. I mean, if the what really is becoming one of the beautiful things of living in modern times is to see how utterly clear and untrammeled one's vision can be with just the slightest modicum of investigation or independent and critical thinking. How it's clear that the preferred vehicle of the institutionalists, the preferred vehicle of the what we might call the imposers, the preferred vehicle of what Thomas Sowell called those who ascribe to the vision of the anointed, for leading not just themselves or those within their sphere into some greater existence, but indeed to encompass the world and impose the vision of the anointed upon the entire world. The vehicle that's most preferred for these people is the state. It is the state because of the magnitude of its power to apply coercive, well, just apply coercion through and fool people into believing that it has this spellbinding, almost otherworldly power.
Yeah.
I mean, whether and you could just name a government. It doesn't even if you were to look at governments that we would feel much more inclined to maybe not support, but feel an affiliation with. I have sympathies with Nayib Bukele in El Salvador. I don't know how one could not have some um, warm feelings toward a man who turned the most dangerous country in the world into one of the safest countries, and one that used the power of Catholic prayer to defeat the enormous and all nearly omnipotent drug cartels within his own small country, recognizing they had to rely on God to bring about temporal justice in this realm, and then also to trust each other, those of goodwill within El Salvador, to rid themselves of the plague of these truly satanic gangs and cartels. I, but you could also say, look at El Salvador. I see the images of these prisons, and I'm I recoil at that. The men are treated essentially like dogs or livestock in pens. Now they might have satanic insignia on them, and they might have tattoos that reference and call upon Beelzebub to guide and protect them, and sorcery, and they're all these things. But they are treated very much as caged animals. They're very whatever shred of humanity was still operative within them is further reduced in their captivity or in their prison life. So I I know this might sound soft, and people on the right might say that, oh, I'm just kind of a wishful thinking libertarian here, but there's a reason why we call prisons penitentiaries. The prisoner was supposed to be a penitent, and in incarceration, while incarcerated, was to call upon or realize the gravity of their transgression, in this case, in a legal and probably also moral circumstance, and repent and repair so that they might be reintroduced into society.
Right.
And I don't know if that, it doesn't seem like that's a goal. I don't know what the sentence is of these El Salvadorian gang members are. It doesn't seem as though their prospects for a simple and non-complicated reentrance into society is possible.
What would you say to somebody who argues that the poor conditions of the prison make someone even more fearful of committing crime?
Sure, that it prison ought not to be this comfortable place. It's not it shouldn't be a glamour slammer or anything like that, especially for those who've committed serious heinous crimes ranging from murder, rape, other modes of violence, battery, you name it. And yes, I agree to an extent, but does that have to be? I guess we're getting into the. I didn't know we were going to go. I wish I would have read more. Gustave de Molinari, the famous libertarian who wrote his treatise on prisons in the 19th century. Great libertarian and ANCAP thinker, by the way. But my question would be the essence of the act. Are you punishing the criminals just to punish them, or are you punishing them with the intent of ensuring that one, that the punishment serves as a deterrent. I don't know how much it would, especially in these, super prisons. And then are you doing it in this? The removal from society is necessary to be sure, and many of them, if indeed, I'm not some sort of Pope Francis. Um, I almost said Luddite, but that doesn't make sense. I'm not some sort of Pope Francis wishy-washy. Let's change the catechism on the death penalty. If it's determined that indeed the crime merits the punishment, then fine. Um, so, but at the same time, we really have to examine intent and the circumstances. And furthermore, what I find too is the most dehumanizing aspect is that they all look the same. All the prisoners look the same. And so to strip someone of their individuality in an effort, what I would argue it seems, to impose collective guilt. Are all of those prisoners individually equally guilty and culpable in El Salvador of the crimes they committed? Of course, that's impossible. That'd be impossible,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
They can't all be guilty of the same level of crime, the same intentionality, and thus the same culpability. I mean, just their circumstances, life experience would make that not possible. Um, so that's why I find more dehumanizing about it and worrisome.
Yeah.
So what I was going, why we got off to the El Salvador thing is just even the best of states. I mean, we could go to the purest state. Let's go back to Louis the Ninth of France, or you have this super Catholic monarch who rightly burned copies of the Talmud after the Pope told him to. Gregory the Ninth told him to, and he was right to do it because the Talmud is a disastrously demonic and sinister book that is just dripping with evil, dripping with the stain of Satan and human debauchery and blasphemy and pederasty. It got every possible disgusting evil in it. I mean, to the point where, as I was listening to Timothy Gordon on his Rules for Retrogrades podcast, and he did a whole analysis of the Talmud and of the charges that were leveled against it in the 13th century. Um, and the debauchery, the claims are disgusting, that angels were engaged in sex and that who was it? Was it Ham who, instead of clothing his father's nakedness when Noah got drunk, he actually molested Noah? This was a claim of in the Talmud. Just a lot of sexual perversity that's talked about, and it's all to justify the sexual perversity that Jews wanted to engage in. Um, it's really well. So that's a good government to get rid of such degrading and disgusting works. And even then, I mean, now you could argue that what Louis the Ninth's system of government was, because it was so feudal in nature, it was much more voluntaristic. There was indeed a social contract between the king and his lords and vassals, and they entered into it voluntarily, you see. So there is governance there. How much we could say that Louis the Ninth exercised coercion over his subjects is a matter of history. We'd have to investigate. But what I can say is that to the degree that they entered into that willingly and voluntaristically, well, then that's not anything near the notion of the modern state today. I mean, it's not even apples and origins, it's apples and orangutans. It's a different mode of species and entity.
Right.
Yeah.
So even right, even the best of the state is not even close to the alternative.
Yes, and it suppresses, even in the best of them, suppresses individuality, suppresses freedoms, and in fact, it suppresses the imagination because one needs to be free as an individual to exercise proper imagination, creativity, direct one's strengths in the division of labor into the modes of production and contribution that are most not just advantageous to them, but to general society and from which we all benefit.
Do you want to talk about the you can't be Catholic if list?
Let's do that, especially because I'm happy to say that the book that needs to be written more than ever, I'm writing. I started writing. I don't know how fast it's going to go, but the composition is such that it's all the more apparent to me that this book, in which we talk about the evil of the state and how the church is needed to redeem libertarian and anarcho-capitalist theory, and also the perspective, historical, sociological, political, and economic of anarcho-capitalism needs to inform the church in her social teaching.
Mm.
This is the book that I'm working on. I, as I was saying before, we live in an era where we could benefit not in hindsight, but with 2020 vision and look at the various mechanizations of states throughout the world, not just the purely satanic ones like the government of Israel, but Western nations, name one. Maybe Luxembourg's not on the top of the list as far as egregious criminal nation states, but just name one. Well, actually, Liechtenstein would be one. Maybe Liechtenstein, famously, I think it was 5 years ago, the king of Liechtenstein, who had previously veto power over the works of the legislator in Vaduz, which I think is the capital of Vaduz, Liechtenstein. Yes, he said there was a bill that was approved by the Liechtensteinian legislature to allow for elective abortions. Liechtenstein was one of the last sovereignties in Europe to outlaw abortion. And sure enough, when the king vetoed it because he was a devout and is a devout Catholic, the the Congress or the Parliament simply rewrote the Constitution to make sure that they could not just override his veto, but they essentially wrote the royal power of veto out of the Constitution in Liechtenstein. So, no matter what state we're talking about, you could just, even though it might seem innocuous and um, not necessarily applicable in terms of using the hammer and the nail to pin it down as an evil entity, it still can be.
Let's talk about this little spat. You cannot be Catholic and feminist, Freemason, pro-abortion. Off to a good start.
Yes, off to a great start. And now I we should note that this is from Patrick Coffin, whose work I greatly admire. If you're not one of those who just imbibes all of the offerings in Catholic alternative media, let's say, whether it's on YouTube or Rumble or like, you might not know who Patrick Coffin is, but he's a great Catholic apologist, true advocate for masculinity with and patriarchy within the church, a return of that, a great advocate for orthodoxy within the church, and a return of the traditional liturgy. So I'm a huge fan, but he's awfully wrong here with his fourth assertion.
Batting cleanup, libertarian.
Okay. Now he goes on to say communist and pro LGBTQ, relativist, true, new ager, yes, pro pornography, of course, you can't be a Catholic and all of those things. He goes on to say occultist, good, you can't do that. Promoter of contraception, absolutely. Contraception is just a gateway to murder and a degradation of the divine image in human persons. And then universalist, and that includes someone who's a syncretist or someone who, like, Professor or Bishop Barron, denies the existence of hell, despite the assertions of our Lord, the incarnate Word of God, and then the tens of thousands of saints who assert its existence, and that, like Catherine of Siena said, it's quite full. So let's get to libertarian now. Charlie and I, you know quite well by this time, we don't necessarily identify as libertarians. So I'm in a weird position wherein I have to defend libertarians without being one. Now, the reason I find it appropriate to strike out or strike back against or issue a response and retort to Patrick Coffin in this assertion is because, of course, there's a lot of confusion as to what libertarianism is. And then if there's confusion about what libertarianism is, they're certainly going to also put on that list, maybe right behind libertarianism, even ahead of it, anarcho-capitalism. Uh, so it's important that in these situations that is you, I feel like I'm asserting the Bush doctrine. You got to attack them where they're at, or so you get them out there at the in the libertarian argument before they they attack you here in Capistan.
Right. Do you want to get into all this afterwards?
You could just touch a little bit upon it. My response, especially. So my response was,
They still want to kill babies.
well, wait, you didn't read
Oh,
my
before
response.
you got it. You're
Yeah.
wrong on the libertarian thing. I'm an ANCAP and Catholic, so I take it to the proper extreme. Don't confuse libertarian with libertine.
And I just go so far as to say that without putting words and or thoughts into Patrick Coffin's mind or his mouth, respectively, um, there's a confusion, even especially among traditional Catholics, that libertarianism means libertinism, and that with libertinism you get all of the
You get to smoke
LGBTQ, the
weed.
drug use, the yes, but and certainly you get abortion, as a later commenter goes on to write. So let's not define it as libertinism. Libertarianism does not. There's a very simple syllogism, I suppose we could call it, of what defines and delineates libertarianism from libertinism. At the heart of libertarianism, we have the zero aggression principle and the notion that, of course, you cannot aggress against another person, especially one who is non-threatening, an innocent individual. Of course, aggression comes in many forms, could be physical, could be in terms of their property. Any aggression that would be spoken of in, for example, the Ten Commandments or the Decalogue. God outlines what aggression is very clearly throughout Scripture and then throughout the rest of Revelation, especially within church teaching as it articulates and then, further elaborates upon Revelation. So it's not hard to identify what is unrighteous aggression or immoral aggression. Whereas libertinism is simply a notion that you can do anything you possibly desire, even if it often transgresses against or goes beyond the line of uh, trampling upon or not disrespecting the rights of, or I suppose sensibilities of individuals.
Yep.
Moreover, I shouldn't say we because we don't identify as libertarians, but ANCAPs. But libertarians are right in the saying we don't. Oftentimes, what traditionalist Catholics believe libertarianism amounts to is a true anarchism by which we don't allow for any type of what we would call governance or hierarchy. That there's a radical egalitarian streak in it, and as such, everyone is their own agoristic and atomistic king, ready to assert the rights of a ruler and a sovereign, not just over their own property and selves, but over others, in preference for of their own mode of life. That's not true of libertarianism at all. There's a recognition that there's governance, and it ought to be hierarchical according to merit, and that can only be achieved in the marketplace for an ANCAP. And that's why we so closely associate with anarcho-capitalism. Whereas libertines, they are the ones that believe in radical egalitarianism. They're the ones who assert that you have a right to promote ideas that are abusive to others, um, because it's the ultimate value is seeking out one's own personal, temporal, often bodily pleasure. but within true libertarianism and certainly anarcho-capitalism, there's a recognition of behaviors, appetites, attitudes, vices that are destructive and thus ought to be avoided. And so we want governance, we just don't want government. Anarchism, no rulers. And for an anarcho-Catholic, an anarcho-capitalist Catholic, there's one ruler, okay? And he happens to, yes, reside on earth in the form of the most holy sacrament of the Eucharist. And the third person of the Trinity is the animating soul of the church, as St. Augustine said, all true. They are earthly in that sense. But for an anarcho-Catholic capitalist or anarcho-capitalist Catholic, there are no temporal rulers that we ought to subject ourselves to. And then what is all the more apparent, and it was apparent in the temptation of Christ in the Gospel of Luke, it's all the more apparent is we don't have to listen to them because listening or obeying, recognizing earthly rulers who assert coercive power over us is a recognition of their right to steal, to pillage, to rob, to, in the most larcenous of fashion, inhibit our freedoms, which ought to be fully enjoyed and fully realized in Christian life. I mean, are we so according to whether it's Patrick Coffin or anyone else who would say you can't be a libertarian because you don't want government? I would retort, you can't be a Catholic and want government in its present form, especially because in the end, you're going to assert that I have some obligation, a moral duty to pay for weapons going over to mutilate Russian soldiers and bomb Russian civilians in the Ukraine-Russia war? Or worse, I'm supposed to pay for all of the debauchery in an institution where there was an actual sodomistic action in the halls of its Congress, and we're supposed to worship these things as they were built in Masonic and Greek, Greco-Roman and pagan temples. I don't understand how that's a harder sell than him trying to. I'm sorry, it's I don't understand how it's such a hard sell for me to sell to present day Catholics that the state ought not to be respected because of how it's acting today, the slaughter of Palestine, the genocide going on in Palestine, and we have a president who simply not only rolls out the literal red carpet for the genocidal maniac in charge of it, but then pushes in his chair whenever he sits down. I mean, why am I? Why is this relationship such that I have to become the slave of the servant of a genocidal maniac who happens to be a Jewish Zionist head um, of an apartheid state in the Middle East? That's how hard they have trouble being convinced of that. But it should be easy for me to say, well, I should be convinced by Patrick Coffin that, oh, well, we need a state and there is a necessity of it. There's a need for it. Do you get my point?
I definitely do.
Okay.
Do you want to talk about a town that has many rulers?
Well, if I could, just before we jump off to that town, I just want to assert that for people who are scandalized by what I'm saying about the not just comfortable complementarity that ought to be emphasized between anarcho-capitalism and Catholicism, just just go and do a brief search, look on Grok or AI or do whatever, and just say, where is it in the church's teaching a demonstrable, emphatic denunciation of what we know as anarcho-capitalism today? Operative free markets wherein individuals cooperating within a mutual beneficial division of labor and productive capacity and free consumption of each other's labor, which Pope Benedict, by the way, in Deus Caritas Ex said, every exchange of a truly economic nature is an act of love. It's wanting the best for the other when it's done correctly. And that truly that can't necessarily be done when you have fiat currency, central banking, and when you have all of the conditions of a low trust society that comes about because of those nefarious institutions that aren't a part of a truly operative free market. Yeah. Well, just look, I mean, people say, oh, the popes have denounced again and again anarchism. They denounced anarchism as it was left or anarcho-socialism. But aside from very tenuous, tenuously connected passages, from example, John Paul II in Centesimus Annus about, for example, let me read one of them to you. Where is it? This is, oh, okay. Well, no, actually, this isn't from, let me read this one from Pius XI. This is in Quadragesimo Anno, okay, in 1931. He says this, and this is on the 40th anniversary. Why it was called Quadragesimo Anno was because it was the 40th anniversary of Rerum Novarum, which is Leo the 13th's famous encyclical about social life and work and labor and capital as it operates. Pius XI explicitly addresses anarchism alongside socialism and communism. Again, the popes are equating, given Catholic tradition, anarchism, the idea of no government existing, no governance existing, with socialism and communism. And this is what he said: religious socialism, Christian socialism are contradictory terms. No one can be at the same time a good Catholic and a true socialist. Again, no problem here with anarcho-capitalism, right? If, like all errors, socialism contains some truth, which, moreover, the Supreme Pontiffs have never denied, it is based nevertheless on a theory of human society, peculiar to itself and irreconcilable with true Christianity. Again, socialism, like anarchism, denies the rights of lawful authority and seeks to dissolve the bonds of society, leading to chaos and the destruction of the natural order established by God. But you see, they're not
It's different.
differentiating.
Right.
Right. So, but I Coffin and the like, the traditional Catholics will say, well, then anarchism equals socialism.
Wow.
They're equally condemned.
Yeah.
That's not true. I mean, that's true in the sense that they're pointing out the foibles of both socialism and the conditions which it produces, and anarchism, which is just leftist anarchism, like a Saint-Simonian or Proudhon type anarchism. But what we're advocating for is not no rulers, or not to have a system of no rulers in which there's a disestablishment of hierarchy and a radical egalitarianism and a proletarian revolution. Nothing of the sort. All we're simply arguing is that one cannot aggress against a free, non-aggression emitting person, non-threatening person, which is just essentially the golden rule: do unto others as you'd have done unto you. Again, core Christian notion and belief. And then furthermore, of course, that God has it's so beautiful that even after the fall, that God so orders or allows the ordering of our productivity so that, as Ludwig von Mises said, and he was going to entitle Human Action Social Cooperation, that was the initial title of the book, Human Action, is that through cooperation, we move from what is the real core, I suppose, fundamental tendency of human existence from the beginning, that is scarcity and impoverishment, toward mutual cooperation and benefit that brings about happiness and prosperity. It's that type of freedom and that type of socialism and that type of cooperative action that God always calls us to, whether it's in the Old Testament, which is clear within the Decalogue and other entities, the book of Samuel, Maccabees, especially. Again, the schismatics don't like Maccabees, but because they love the state. I always contend that Luther put it out because he doesn't, all this talk about the Maccabees being, well, it's wild too about how one of the reasons that the Protestants kick out Maccabees and Sirach and Wisdom is because they prefer the later Jewish rabbis, Masoretic texts. So they follow the Jews as to what should be part of the canon instead of the original Christian church. All right, but be that as it may, it's amazing that God has offered this to us. And I would go so far as to say that it's through this mutual cooperation that leads to prosperity and leads to human advancement and happiness that we see a foretaste of the heavenly kingdom, wherein our work is constant prayer, our work is constant adoration, but it's together with all the saints and angels. It's in that harmony and melody that we offer proper praise to God in the heavenly kingdom. And a obviously inadequate replica of that, a semblance of it, a fleeting vision of it, is in the way we charitably interact, as Pope Benedict said, in again, Deus Caritas Est, through exchange.
Gonna be one hell of a book.
It's going to ruffle a lot of feathers, and but we live in an era where feathers need to be not just ruffled but plucked.
Do you want to talk about a town with many rulers?
Oh, absolutely, little
Here,
dictators.
here it is.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
We go to your gay suburb now.
The People segment brought to you by Tridentine Brewing, the best. Oak Park Climate Action Network's latest open house highlights sustainability. The goal is to inspire others to make big and small changes to their homes.
That's an unappealing picture that they have there of a inside of a house. Looks pretty rough.
Three Oak Park homeowners recently opened their homes to share sustainability measures that are making a difference in their lives and in the way they consume energy. The
We shit
second,
outside.
the second of Oak Park Climate Action Network's spring open houses on April 6th, featuring that's what they call it, the acronym, volunteers as well as industry experts, detailing what has been done in these homes and how others might take steps to improve their energy efficiency. Wendy Greenhouse, that's hilarious. That's her real
Come
name.
on.
That's her real
That's
name.
not her original name.
That's that can't be real. That's got to be a legal change. The organizer of the walk said that this educational component is one of the benefits of OP Can that she likes to tout. Quote, our climate coaches can answer questions or tell you what it's like to install or use a product. They can offer real life experience from a neighbor, she said. On Gunderson Avenue,
Oh,
homeowner.
I'm sorry. You gotta pause. Can you just scroll up very
Oh
gently?
gosh, I knew he was going to sneak in here somewhere. It's been too long. It's been too long.
Speaking of open houses, sure enough, it's been too long. We can only keep him away for so long a period of time. There's an ad to go to the Percy Julian open house on April 22nd
So,
for two
okay,
hours.
I don't think that's it. I think they're open housing the village hall
Oh,
because
okay. I'm sorry.
they want people to see
Oh,
kind of how old it is,
I see.
which to justify, how they're doing all their renovations and stuff.
That's right. That's right. So there's an open
But
house at
there's
the village
the
hall.
but there's also the Chicago Avenue streetscape, which honors
Right.
Dr. Percy Julian.
Yeah. So I guess they're gonna influence the final design, it says for the,
Yes.
okay. But I just amazing that
He's
the,
gotta we gotta have some entrance music for him. Every time he comes in, we gotta have like a
like
separate
real,
song.
like real funky, like
Yeah.
soul kind of chicken bound.
Yeah, yeah. Like a 60s daytime TV show or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
We
On
bring the funk. We
on
got the
Gunderson
funk.
Avenue, homeowner Macy Majcek shared her home's green improvements. She and her husband Lee purchased their home in 2021 with an eye towards a sustainable renovation. The 1910 American four square stucco home is finished on 4 levels and is now completely electric. Quote, we were looking for a project, she said. I had started doing sustainability work. Both my husband and I were motivated. Their house needed a new HVAC system, so they decided to dig out their basement and add a geothermal heating and cooling system with advanced geothermal plumbing and heating. The house is now heated and cooled with a geothermal system. In the basement, mechanical room, the geothermal system, as well as the water-to-water unit that fuels the radiant heated flooring in the basement, keeps the temperature level and comfortable year round. Majcrack said that the family doesn't need an account with Nicor anymore. Mark Villarreal with Ailey Solar spoke about considerations in putting solar panels on older homes. Ailey Solar typically provides a technical review for customers during which they consider whether the rafters of the house need to be reinforced to support the solar panels and whether the electric system can handle the load. Villarreal said that the 200 amp service is ideal for solar installations.
I suspect we're never going to get the final cost of putting in the geothermal
We'll see.
system.
Hang
And
on. Hang on.
oh boy,
In the kitchen, a volunteer showed off the family's induction stovetop. Nearby, Joe Konopacki, president and CEO of Insight Property Services, demonstrated the blow test performed on the home's doors to test the building's
oh, there's a blow test going on.
air tightness. Blow tests are essential to addressing actual sources of leaks in a home in order to target insulating where it will make the most improvement. Village trustee
We've gone
Susan
from suck to blow pretty fast.
Village trustee Susan Buchanan was one of OP Can's many volunteers at the Moscrack home. Her own interest in sustainability drew her to OP Can. Quote, everyone is on their path to sustainability, she said. Everyone is learning what they can do in their homes. At a 1927 era brick house on Linden Avenue, a heat pump system replaced the traditional forced air furnace system. OP Can volunteer and Oak Park resident Mac Robinette noted that heat pump systems are 2 to 3 times more efficient than gas-powered furnaces. I think it's Robinet. I'm gonna go with Robinet, actually. Robinet is passionate about the need for sustainability. Quote, over time, we're not going to have a choice, he predicted. People in Oak Park shouldn't be buying new gas furnaces. That's going backwards.
Oh God,
Well, I,
his name is just as androgynous as the picture.
He practices what he preaches. Robinet has had a ground source heat pump since 2011 and said that it has paid for itself many times over. Matt Nichols, one of the founders of Oak Park's Energy Matters, was on hand to discuss heat pump installation. Matt and his brother, both OPRF and Purdue grads, started their business 11 years ago. Together, the brothers work on energy efficiency and heating and cooling solutions for local customers. Quote, it's a fun challenge for me as an engineer, Nichols said. Most projects are unique given the older housing stock in the area, and Nichols said Energy Matters can act as climate coaches to walk through homes and multi-unit buildings to provide assessments and recommend individual solutions. The third home on the walk was the recipient of a Green Award from the Village of Oak Park. Homeowner Derek Eater fully electrified his 1916 brick bungalow with rooftop solar, heat pump, HVAC, and hot water heater and electric appliances. The process is detailed in a video produced by the village.
And his ComEd bill is $9,000 a month. I just don't get.
No mention.
Yeah.
Last one. Anti-Trump hands-off protesters pack downtown Oak Park.
Stop ruining our future, reads the placard. That's great. Oh, that poor little girl who was forced to make that and then stand in the rain. Okay.
Oak Parkers gathered in mass to protest federal cuts to education, LGBTQ protections, Social Security, health programs, and more. I don't think she's close to Social Security.
No.
Hands off
It's
2025.
not going to be around when she's eligible anyway.
A protest against President Donald Trump's administration took over Oak Park's downtown Saturday afternoon. More than 1,000 people gathered to march. Geez, 1,000 people gathered to march in a loop along Lake Street from Scoville Park to Harlem Avenue and back for the Hands Off Oak Park protest. One of more than 1,200 such rallies held in communities around the country as citizens took to the streets to demonstrate against the president's policies.
I'm sorry, but isn't that counterintuitive in the sense that he just wants no influence over? I mean, let Oak Park. I might be putting words in the Trump administration's mouths, but isn't the whole idea that we are going to get hands off? That's what they're protesting. They want the government's hands on, right?
Which is hilarious because the next sentence, right? The next sentence contradicts the first one. Oak Park protesters expressed outrage about White House executive orders cutting support to public schools, libraries, health programs, and other institutions, as well as Trump's agenda for the economy, immigration, and diplomatic relations. So cutting
Okay.
support to public schools, libraries, health programs, that actually is hands
Yes.
off.
Okay. That's what they wanted. Okay.
Oak
You got
Park,
what you want.
Oak Park voted overwhelmingly against Trump last November. Did I ever tell you
Shock.
this
Get
number?
out.
Did I tell you this number? With
Yeah.
just over 90% of voters? 9 out of 10, man. If Steph
Yes.
Curry is at the free throw line, I think it's going in.
That's got to be one of the bluest towns in all of the United States. 90%.
Right.
And that means that it's not even probably the other 10%, half of them voted for Jill Stein or something like that. So,
Protesters carried signs lampooning Trump along with world's richest man and Department of Government Efficiency head Elon Musk and other conservative
nice little
figures.
Maoist jab there.
Yeah, while also using megaphones and playing musical instruments as motorists rolled down Lake Street, honking their horns and revving their engines.
And dirtying the environment as a result. How disgusting.
Hands off. Okay,
Revving their
so
Tesla engines.
this guy has a sign that says, "Oh, the pictures are great. Respect the rule of law.
That's rich.
Uphold the Constitution." That's a guy in Oak Park has that.
All
All
of
of
a
a
sudden, they're
sudden,
James Madison. You know? They're walking down Madison. That doesn't make you James Madison.
hands off my education. This poor guy's got.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, this is
Oh, it's a little montage.
there's a there's a Tesla sign back here.
And look at the amazing diversity. Oh, wait. It's all
Oh,
old white people.
it's all miserable whites.
All old white Karens and their cuck husbands.
Stand up for workers' rights.
Uh-huh.
Hands off our due
Isn't it weird that all the
process.
placards look like they're written by the same person? It's all in the same script.
The lack of diversity is really interesting.
Sure.
Hands off, hands off. Okay, they all have hands off our due process. Hands off DEI. I mean, that's kind of the no
Mm.
human is illegal. They got the ICE.
Oh, yes.
It's a this guy's got the Club Penguin.
Uh-huh.
Hands
Yeah.
off national parks. Hands off Canada. Hands off our democracy. Hands off our books.
Yes.
Hands off Social Security. That's rich.
Yeah, that's rich.
Hands off DEI.
Uh-huh. It's all a bunch of boomers.
US does not equal monarchy. They've got the king.
Yes.
This guy's wearing a shirt that says this isn't fun anymore.
That guy. Oh my God. Did his balls just shrink to the point where he's actually inverted now? Or
Somebody snuck a this is pretty faint, but they snuck in a tax the
they're
rich.
undescended?
Snuck in
Tax the
a
rich.
tax
Ah.
the rich. Oh, this is
Uh-huh.
the former village president. Wow.
Oh, okay. David Pope.
Hands off our democracy. There's
Hmm.
two of those. Hands off our rights. Man, I wish there was more than six of these.
Hmm. Again, the amazing
So
diversity. It's all old white women.
this girl's wearing a mask
Okay.
outside.
It's a Z. It's not a girl.
Uphold the Constitution.
That's rich, man. It's amazing how, yeah,
We got John Hancock.
yeah.
John Hancock.
All of a sudden, they're Governor Morris.
I want my signature. Obviously, it's the Declaration. But I want my signature to be the biggest on this one. What a joke. Many protesters marched alongside their family members, like Susan Doyle, who walked with her daughter, Jennifer, and granddaughter, Zoe.
No.
Quote, "We're here to protect democracy. Everything that's happening is destroying our country," Susan Doyle said.
These are the same people that were under COVID ratting out their neighbors and calling for totalitarian control over their little hamlet.
Oh, it gets better. It
Mm.
gets better. We're going to get to, they brought Christ into this. Anna Fink, an Oak Parker who serves as principal at Carlos Fuentes Elementary in Chicago.
I love that you did the. it's,
Fuentes?
all of a sudden, I am from Nicaragua. It's Carlos
Elementary in Chicago.
Fuentes.
Marched with her son Max to protest Trump's education policies, which include a full-on dismantling of the U.S. Department of Education.
Man, I can't stand these people. I obviously have a lot of problems with Trump, but the one or two good things he's doing, and they're the ones that stand out to them as the most egregious. Oh,
Quote, "I'm an educator and I want my children's futures to be amazing, and it's not going to be from what I can see," Fink said. "I'm afraid that my students will lose vital funding. I worry about my students, my teachers, and my children. I think in Oak Park we may live in this bubble. That's true.
You think
Yeah.
the first observation that has a ring of truth to it?
There's some self-awareness from an Oak Parker, but it only took
We
3
might live
years.
in a little bit of a bubble here.
But we need to be outspoken, and I'm so proud of our community today.
Hmm.
Stephanie Dwyer brought her dog Mavis, who is outfitted with a Beware of Doge. That's actually pretty funny. Bib, I'm most worried about services for people. I'm really scared about people, particularly veterans, losing out.
They
Dwyer
all
said,
turned conservative. They're all boomercons now.
it's so many things that are bothering me. Oh gosh. Roger Botner, a deacon at Oak Park's Grace Episcopal Church, said he felt the protest was an excellent display of Oak Park values.
Again, ring of truth.
Quote, I rise up with with righteous anger against all of the injustice that's going on in this country, not only as a Christian, but as a citizen. I'm tired of having my intelligence insulted by this administration, Botner said. I'm heartened to see that so many people of all colors and all stripes are out here in solidarity as a community because that's what America needs to get back to. Get back to being with one another, not against one another.
Ugh, God, just just
Oh, we
empty
got 8 more
bromides.
pictures. 8 more pictures.
Oh, nice.
Hands off education. Kids need to learn. Rule of law.
Law.
Period, law period. Hands off Social Security. Hands off LGBTQ plus rights. And they all have the little hands.
Yes.
I have disabilities. Don't be cruel to me. Save Medicaid and Social Security. And then the mom says, my son has disabilities. Don't be cruel to him. Save Medicaid and Social Security.
Mhm. Okay,
Trump plus Doge.
those are do these people not realize that those are largely state programs?
Trump
Okay.
plus Doge plus GOP House equals idiocracy. Hands off our universities. Trumpster the dumpster.
Oh, they're so creative.
They got a Gandhi sign? Just somebody holding up a Gandhi sign?
That's great.
Oh,
I
this
knew
is just
Gandhi. Gandhi was fine. Didn't need very much. Didn't want to.
you're so tall. Isn't there room inside that body for I can't read what that says. I wish I could.
Yeah. You're so tall. Isn't there room inside that body for
This is funny. You can only see the front half of the sign, but it just says no one voted, which
Yes.
is hilarious. But obviously, it's gonna be something after
Yeah.
that we can read.
Voted Elon Musk, I guess.
Hands off my retirement.
Uh-huh. Boy, these people
You
are morons.
you wanted sheep eggs, but got measles instead.
Ooh, okay. All right. There you
Hands off
go.
our bodies and rights.
Okay, so
Fight
there's a
for
killing the babies.
Fight
one.
for DEI.
Fight for
I
D.
love the hands off rule of law. It's just hilarious.
I know.
And then we got a drummer. Hands
They got
off
a
our
little-
Medicare.
They got a little drummer boy.
I wish I could have read every single sign.
Yeah.
Oh gosh. Debbie here, a retired Oak Park and River Forest high school Spanish teacher, spends her time volunteering to help immigrants with their asylum applications through the migrant ministry, which is housed at Centro San Edmundo, the former St. Edmund Catholic School on Oak Park Avenue.
Ah.
She said that Latin American immigrants have been recklessly vilified by Trump.
Recklessly.
Quote,
Yes.
I hear their stories and they are just so awful, she said. The people who come here from Venezuela, they're the victims of the gangs.
Not to mention that they are some of the gangs, members of the gangs. But
The protest came on the heels of one of the largest stock market falls in decades, as the American stock market lost roughly $5 trillion in value in response to the president's, quote, Liberation Day order to raise U.S. tariff barriers to their highest point in over a century, according to the Economic Times. Protester Jim Farrell said he fears the move will send the United States into an economic spiral.
here we go. They're finally
Oh, we
getting
got
to
some
the
Adam
real-
Smith. Oh my gosh.
They're-
Oh my
this is where
gosh.
they're
We got an
finally
Adam,
getting in.
we got an Adam Smith cameo coming up.
They're really mad about their 401ks and their retirement and trust accounts.
Quote, the markets have spoken and a lot of people are being hurt by this already. I'm an economist and that's the dumbest economic move I've seen in my life.
Okay,
Farrell
all
said.
right, all right.
It's
I'm here with you.
it's Econ 101. Adam Smith and all those guys were all about no tariffs.
Oh boy, here we go.
They didn't make sense 200 years ago and they still don't make sense. They just destroy value around the world.
Good for you,
Jim
Farrell.
Farrell, welcome to
Welcome
him
to
as
the Hot Water History Podcast.
can we have
Mr.
you as a
Farrell.
guest?
Yeah.
Can we have a Jim Farrell guest appearance?
I'm thinking that Mr. Farrell, although I think he might turn very quickly into Chairman Mao or Trotsky when we say, well, what if the tariffs actually attain a truly free market, zero to zero reciprocal trade agreement throughout the world? Oh no, he's terrible
I
on
don't
that
know.
too.
I don't know. I've got hope for Jim. I got
Okay.
hope for Jim because he's not mentioning anything else. Like they don't have him quoted for anything else. They just
Yeah.
wanted the Wednesday Journal wanted they needed something to put in. They needed to mention the tariffs somehow,
Right.
and I think he's that guy for them.
Hmm.
So I'm holding out hope for Jim. I'll look like an idiot in like 2 weeks when it comes out that
Do you think Jim Farrell voted for Ravi Pericat? In
I
other
do.
words?
I do.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Many protesters, like recent Dominican University graduate Jessica Guzman, said they weren't moved to demonstrate by any one Trump policy, but by what felt to them like countless different ways they feared their town could be hurt by the president's new policies. Quote, I feel like you could pick anything he's done out of a hat, and there's someone here in Oak Park who's been affected. That's not the right spelling of
Correct.
affected. She
That's
said, not
bad.
every issue might impact you directly, but it impacts someone you know, someone you love, your community members.
So they're collectively aggrieved.
The Oak Park protest was just one of many in the Chicagoland area, the largest of which was held outside the Daily Center in downtown Chicago. River Forest resident Alice, who did not want their full name published, was originally going to go to the Chicago Loop rally to protest against anti-DEI legislation and U.S. support for Israel's actions in its war against Hamas, but opted to make her voice heard closer to home.
Because she's lazy.
Quote, I thought it was important to make a local demonstration. She won't make the drive.
Yeah.
I thought it was important to make a local demonstration of
They're literally
non-compliance, she
15
said.
minutes away on the L on the green. Just hop on the green line on Lake Street. You're there in 15 minutes.
Oak Park is a diverse community and we need to keep it that way. DEI cuts and funding cuts threaten that. There's a lot of money in Oak Park, but it's great to see that people are coming out to fight oligarchy.
Oh, good Lord.
Several local elected officials also participate in the protests, including recently re-elected village trustee Anya. He said that federal cuts are forcing the village government to answer many tough questions.
Oh, yeah. The tough question is like how many hundreds of millions of dollars are we going to spend on the unnecessary village hall that most
the
residents
COVID
only
money
spend
ran
5 minutes
out.
in a given
Yeah,
year?
because the COVID money ran out.
Yeah.
As Anya spoke with Wednesday Journal, newly re-elected village president Vicky Skaman walked by and gave him a hug.
Oh, God.
That's how the article ends.
There's
I'm just going to go through this. This is one of the views from they have they have citizens that write to despair or not to despair. That is the question. And then they've got I just wanted to see if there's any other pictures because I just had so much fun doing that. But it doesn't look like
no. Well, there's a picture of Thomas Jefferson.
Thomas Jefferson, 2018. Opinion. You got your guy.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the
Oh.
people segment, folks.
That's it.
Meanwhile in Oak Park.
What would have happened if I'd gone for it and just said, no, I'm gay?
Buy Trinitine beer.
By TV. I had a blast. I didn't know it was that many visuals towards the bottom.
The
And
visuals were key.
I almost wish I was there.
I
Just
know.
just interview people.
If we were there, would you just giggle? Look at that one, look at that one. I think I would
Right.
just giggle most of the time. I don't know if I could I couldn't do an Alex Stein and just start saying, "Look at these people! Oh, look at."
I mean, it's 1,000 people. That's no small group.
Yeah, they might slap fight you to death.
Anyways,
I mean, I did not see. Did you see a male figure? Was there an ounce of testosterone in that whole wave of people?
No.
No, that was an estrogen charged scene.
Do you have anything else you want to share? Or we're gonna say peace out to everyone until next
Let's
week.
say peace out. I don't have anything else, and I'll just keep on keeping on.
All right, everyone.
Hold tight to the cross. Amen.
Amen. God bless.
Bless.
Peace.